What's up guys, David here, 122 filling in for Dzeeff over in his channel. Hope you guys don't mind me minding the store while he's away. He asked me to do a video for him, so let's do a top 10 because those are fun, everyone likes those. And I figured I would use this excuse to do a top 10 I've been meaning to do for a while, and this is going to be my top 10 weird cards in this game. And when I say a weird card, I don't mean a card that looks weird, I mean a card that it acts weird. Its effect is a strange thing, making you do something or having its mechanics that are outside the normal mechanics of the game, asking the player to perform an action that's just really outside the box. A lot of these are actually particularly old. I think that has something to do with the fact that it was before Konami had a really idea what they were doing with the games. They just made a bunch of really strange cards, but a couple of these are actually newer, so it's interesting to see that somebody over in their R&D department is still kind of being creative. And I'm not going to sit here and yam around for another 5 minutes, so what we're going to do is just get right in the list. Let's get started with number 10. Number 10 is Exchange, a normal spell card. Both players reveal their hands to the other player, and then we each get to pick one off each other's hand and add it to ours. Presumably this happens at the same time, so you don't like pick one and I get to take my card back. That would be ridiculous. Knocking a card out of your opponent's hand with something like Confiscation, Delinquent Duo, Mind Crush, and all the other hand loopy things like the one in Wind-Ups isn't that outside the unusual, but actually taking the card out of your opponent's hand and adding it to yours, that's very strange. The card's not super great because you're giving each other information on what each other's doing, and most of the time you're probably taking a card that you really can't use because it's for their deck and not yours, so it's awfully strange of you to use this card. However, the fact that you get to take a card out of your opponent's hand and put it in yours is just such an odd action, and not very many things do this. Mystical Refpanel! One of Yugi's more obscure cards. He plays it every once in a while and it comes in clutch, but it's honestly one of the strangest cards he has in his deck. Mystical Refpanel is a normal trap card that reads, activate when a spell card that targets a player is activated. That effect of that spell card is switched to the other player. At first it doesn't sound super weird, it's just redirecting the effect of a spell card. Then you realize it says a spell card targets a player. I don't know what that means because there is like no spell cards in this game that actually target a player. Like they say, target yourself, draw 2 cards. like pot of greed. No, it doesn't say that. Which means whenever your opponent activates a spell card and you respond with this thing, one of you inevitably has to call a judge over and say, does this even work? I don't know, because no actual spell card works like this. It seems the thing is pretty handy against draw cards, and any drawbacks to those draw cards end up getting stuck to the player who activated the draw card. Like I'm pretty sure if somebody plays this against Pot of Duality, your opponent is the one that played the duality, can't special summon, but you get to excavate the card and keep it. So that's neat. It certainly can really turn a duel around, like making your opponent banish 10 off the top of their deck and then you draw 2 off of Desires, but I think the reason why it doesn't see any plays is because it best works against draw cards, and even in that instance it's still relying on your opponent to do something, so it's just really slow, and it's a ruling nightmare. No one wants to deal with it, but it's certainly a weird effect. Number 8 is Question. Question is the epitome of a weird card because it takes a basic mechanic of the game and completely turns it off, something that is just never a thing. When this card is activated, your opponent cannot check the cards in their graveyard. Yep, you can't look at the cards in your graveyard, which is something you're always allowed to do. That would be like a card saying you can't know how many life points you currently have. That is public knowledge. You're completely allowed to look at the cards in your graveyard, so the fact that a card tells you that you can't is just super strange. But what the rest of the card do, your opponent needs to guess the name of the monster closest to the bottom of their graveyard pile. Yep, that's the question. Do you remember what monster was at the bottom of your graveyard? If he or she calls it right, it's banished, so you don't have to worry about it again. If they call it wrong though, it's special summoned to your side of the field, kind of like a Monster Reborn. The card's super trolly, but it does really punish players for not paying attention to what their game state is. No one uses it, it's really trolly and strange, but it's certainly a weird card and earned its spot on the list. Next up is Lullaby of Obedience, kind of in that same vein as Question. Lullaby is a normal spell that reads, pay 2,000 life points and declare 1 monster card name. Your opponent then looks through their deck and reveals 1 monster of that name if they have it. Then they get to pick 1 of 2 effects. Your opponent has to give that monster to your hand, or special summon it to your side of the field in attack position, ignoring its summoning conditions. This card is just super strange. If you're running a deck that relies on 1 monster very heavily, something like maybe Dark Magician, Spirals, or Blue Eyes White Dragon, this card would probably come in clutch in a mirror match if you are really trying to be that kind of cheese. I suppose the other option you could do is if you know your opponent has something like a Garnet in their deck, like literally Gem Knight Garnet, you could play this thing and add it to your hand or summon it to your side of the field so that they can't then use their brilliant fusions, I suppose. So there's weird applications of this card outside of a mirror match. It's certainly a strange card, and it does open up some really interesting strategies, and I'm really surprised the card hasn't seen like more play as it is. But I always noodle it for a side deck, most certainly. This next one actually just came out in Flames of Destruction, which is really cool to see that they're still making weird cards. Oh boy, Yajiro Invader? Oh, I probably butchered that. Yajiro Invader is a level 5 dark monster, a reptile for some reason, with 2200 attack and 0 defense. And he's got one of the strangest monster effects I have ever read, and I was blown away the first time I read this in Sneak Peek. If this monster is normal or special summoned to a zone other than the main center monster zone, destroy it. So you have to play it in the center zone if you want to keep it. Once per turn, you can move this monster to an adjacent main monster zone. So it's a little ignition effect for you. You just activate him, and you can jump him right or jump him left, as long as it's unoccupied. And then here's where it gets really strange. Each time your opponent would special or normal summon exactly one monster, move this guy to the adjacent spot that's moving towards the monster that was just summoned. Yeah, so if they play a dude like here, and he's here, he'll scooch over. Like I said, it's weird. And then when he's done scooching, he destroys all cards in that column. Like, honestly, he's actually not bad. If he was a level 4, I think I'd like him a lot better. Being a level 5 makes him a little awkward to summon because you gotta sack him for something. But the fact that he just kind of like scooches around the board whenever your opponent plays a monster and he's trying to like chase your guys around, it's just kind of super weird. And I love the fact it just nukes the column when it does it. Honestly, I really like the card, and I kind of want to test it in a deck. Magical hats conceal the Dark Magician. Oh, magical hats. You weirdo battle trap. Magical hats, one of the most misrepresented cards in the anime, is actually not a quick play spell how Yugi uses it, but instead a normal trap card. During your opponent's battle phase, you can choose 2 spell or traps from your deck and then special summon them to main monster zones face down as if they were monsters. 0 attack, 0 defense. You also need to pick one of your current monsters and play that monster face down, and then shuffle the 3 of them around and then put them back in main monster zones at random. The 2 spell or trap monsters that you summon with this card destroy themselves at the end of the battle phase and cannot remain on the field outside of the battle phase. I think they just say that so you can't like cheese the end of the battle phase. I don't know. What's weird about this card is not only are you summoning 2 spell or traps to your side of the field as monsters, summoning a spell in general is just a weird thing to do. It's not playing them as like tokens really. It's like they're actually like monster cards because they are face down. They are just face down spell monsters. It's really a darn shame that they don't stay on the field outside of the battle phase, kind of like how it does in the anime. I don't know why it would be such a problem. There's not a hell of a lot you could do with them, but they are actually a monster for the time being. That's just super strange. The interesting thing about this card, though, is for the longest time, before we got Foolish Burial Goods, it actually was one of the best ways to mill a spell or trap out of your deck because they get sent to the graveyard at the end of the battle phase regardless if they were attacked or not. So it's basically like taking 2 spell or traps from your deck and just sending them to the graveyard, assuming your opponent's entering their battle phase to allow you to do this. It's clunky and slow, and most decks opted to just not do it that way, but it was an option up until we got Foolish Burial Good. Just a quick side note. Okay, now we're getting down to the bottom of the list, and we are going to start asking our opponent to do some weird stuff. Yu-Joe Friendship. Oh yeah, this one's a classic. Offer your opponent a handshake. See, honestly, that's all I'd have to say, because regardless of what this card does, beyond this point, the fact that the card starts off with its activation condition, offer your opponent a handshake. This is so widely outside of what is normally required of a player to do during a duel, that's just really odd. One could say that I think you're supposed to, by official rules, like shake your opponent's hand before a game or whatever, but we mean during gameplay, not like that courtesy crap they stick at the beginning and the end. Besides the weirdo handshake, what does it do? If they accept the handshake, you take both your life points, average them together, and then you both get the average. So if I have 4,000 and you have 8,000, they go together for 12, and we both get a 6. Woot! Did I do that quick maths in my head right? Yes. It's been a long day at work. So not only do we have a card in this game that makes you offer your opponent a handshake, we have a card in this game that forces your opponent to take a handshake. Now, I think it's probably important to note that I believe the official ruling on this card was your opponent doesn't need to actually shake your hand. They only need to accept the concept of a handshake. Like, oh yes, I would shake your hand if your hand wasn't so gross and covered in Cheeto dust. But yeah, it's really odd that the card is letting your opponent opt out of the life point swap unless you got Unity. So, you know, it's a little happy weird card family. This and the trap card. Next up, we have Transmission Gear, a normal trap card. That's what this game needs, more weird battle traps. During damage calculation, play rock, paper, scissors with your opponent. Yup, make the loser of the rock, paper, scissors banish their battling monster face down. It's like a really strange dimensional prison. Dimensional prison. I always say dimensional barrier, but that's the other trap card. I don't know why you wouldn't just play Dimensional Prison. I guess the fact that it banishes it face down means it's really out of the duel, but the fact that like you have to like Rochambeau it is just really weird. Again, just like Yu-Gi-Oh! Friendship, I think officially speaking, you are supposed to start a duel with rock, paper, scissors. It's not outside game mechanics, but it's outside anything you'd ever have to normally do during a duel. And I'm not even positive that it's officially rock, paper, scissors. Everyone rolls dice, but I think it's actually like, you're not supposed to do that. Which I feel like that's a discussion video with the difference between rolling a die and rock, paper, scissors to start a duel. But I'm gonna get way on a tangent if I start talking about that. I think the real hard-hitting question here for Transmission Gear is, why is it like a seemingly Geargia like support card? It has nothing to do with them whatsoever. Is it searchable in that deck? I have no idea. Number 2, Convulsion of Nature. Here's another classic weird card. Everyone knows what Convulsion of Nature does, but what does it do? Convulsion of Nature is a continuous spell that basically says both players take their deck from their deck zone, flip it upside down, and put it back. And then for as long as this card's face up on the field, you play with your deck upside down. So like the last card is now face up and the first card. I love how it says like both players play with their decks upside down and proceed with the current duel. Like it's just like, yeah, you just flip them and you keep going like there's nothing wrong. Don't even worry about it. It's just this is your new normal. I mean, what a weird card. Its obvious only application is the fact that now both players through public knowledge know what the next card at the top of their deck is. So cards like the True Name and Archfiend's Oath and the entire Spiral archetype can use this to some advantage because that means there's some public knowledge knowing what the top card of your opponent's deck is or your deck, and you can get something out of it. Most of the time that's just a super cheesy, not worth it wombo combo, but it's certainly funny, and I think the best application for this card is, I'm not sure if it still works on Dueling Book, but back in Dueling Network days, when you play this card, you'd auto win because no person wants to sit there and actually resolve this card because there was no click flip my deck button. So you had to like banish all the cards like face up into like your banish zone and then play with your banish zone as your deck. So you had to sit there like click, 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 click. No one wanted to do that. So this was an auto win, but that's a really cheesy thing to do. We have 3 honorable mentions for this video. None of them do anything particularly weird, but it's how they do it, which is why they're strange. But that's why I figured they shouldn't get on the list because they do something that we normally do with other cards, just they go about it in an odd way. First up is Last Turn, an ancient banned trap card that reads, this card can only be activated during your opponent's turn when your life points are 1,000 or less. Select one monster on your side of the field and every card on the field and both players' hands go to that player's respective graveyard. After that, your opponent selects one monster from their deck and special summons it to their side of the field, and then you guys are forced to fight the guy that you had and the guy that they played. The winner of that battle wins the duel. So here we have an example where we're not doing anything weird, we're just deciding the duel via battle like we do most of the time, but the fact that a card's forcing you to do it and it's like a winner-take-all death match is just super cool. I think the reason why the card's banned though is people were like targeting like Fossil Dyna type cards, so then your opponent can't actually summon a monster. And the way the card is worded, the player whose monster remains alone on the field is that player has declared the victory. By that wording, if your opponent couldn't summon a monster, your Fossil Dyna is the only thing there, so you auto win. It's super cheesy, especially because you just grabbed victory out of the jaws of defeat. So it's clunky and strange, but again, it doesn't do anything super odd. Next is Double Cross Frog, which again, it doesn't do anything too super strange. It just steals monsters from your opponent's side of the field. We have tons of cards that do that, but it's how it does it. Once per turn, you can take this thing and stick it on your opponent's side of the field, and if you got two of them on your opponent's side of the field, you just take any monsters that are in between the two of them, like a pendulum steal. So weird. But again, like I said, stealing your opponent's monsters, even a mass steal with like something like Switcheroo, isn't super weird. We have cards that do it. It's just that this weird, like, you know, wall of steel that this thing does is just super strange. And the last honorable mention is That Grass Looks Greener. Again, we have tons of cards that mill cards off the top of your deck, but none of them require you to actually know the deck count of both players. Yeah, it's public knowledge. You're always allowed to know how many cards are in your deck and how many cards are in your opponent's deck is, but it's like never anything ever that comes up, except when you play grass. Because you obviously, as the guy with the bigger deck, you get to mill the difference between your two decks, which is great. That's why you play 60 cards. When you go up against a 40 card deck, you mill like 15 or so, depending on the game state, and you just get all the graveyard stuff. That's why they put it to 1. But yeah, knowing the number of cards in your deck is just a little weird. But again, all it's doing is milling, so we have tons of cards that do that. Last but not least is the classic weird card, the most obscure, and the only reason why anyone even remembers it exists is because it is so weird. Parasite! One of Weevil's cards. It's a flip effect monster. Level 2 Earth Insect with a 500/300 attack defense spread, but we don't really care about that. What's its flip effect though? When this card is flipped, place it in your opponent's deck face up and then shuffle their deck. When they draw it, it's special summoned to their side of the field. They take 1,000 burn damage, and then while it's on the field, all their monsters are considered insect type. What? Now we have a card, it's a trap card called Pharaoh's Treasure that puts itself in your deck face up, and when you draw it, I think you get to search like any card out of your deck, but no, this one took that weirdo effect one step further and puts it face up in your opponent's deck. Having a card face up in your deck is super weird. Convulsion of Nature at least makes some kind of sense because the whole deck's face up, but having just one card in your deck face up is weird. Having one card face up in your opponent's deck that's your card is extra weird. I'm surprised we don't have a whole deck based around this mechanic. I think it'd be kind of cool. However, that would be the please steal my cards, I like it deck. Because even if your opponent doesn't intentionally do it, you know, if you took a Parasite deck to a regionals, and you know, it's like round 7 and everyone's exhausted, and you give your opponent these stupid monsters, the whole Parasite archetype, they're gonna shuffle that crap, and at the end of the duel 3, they're gonna just put that crap in their box and walk off with half your deck. You know it's gonna happen because you're both gonna forget. That's probably why they don't do this, and it would be totally an accident most of the time, I would think. But not only that, it's like, it's really hard to resolve this properly, because you gotta shuffle your deck and like not look at it while you're doing it, because you can see the card while you're shuffling it. Like, this only really works in like online simulators, because you can't look at the deck where you're... No, this, you can totally see it, and you can put it at the bottom or whatever. you can cheat. Yeah, super weird. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope Doug comes back, because I miss all of his discussion videos. He does a good discussion video. And I hope you guys didn't mind me minding the store, so let me know in the comments below what you guys think of the video. Any cool ideas for further lists, stick them in here, and then you can jump over to my channel, and you can look at all the fun lists, because I'm like, watch Pojo. See, that's a clever joke if you're old. And remember, guys, if you don't troll the meta, who will? I will see you guys over my channel. See you guys next time.